Ooh. Okay, we are live. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dr. Tara Tuesdays. I am so excited to be your host, Dr. Tara. And today I am so excited about this part 2 of our 4-part Mental Health Awareness Month conference. In the spirit of mental health awareness, in the spirit of us just finishing up Mother's Day, we are having a conversation with mothers about mothering through. So if you are new to the Dr. Tara community, please feel free to relax and enjoy yourself. And also, as always, your comments are welcome. So give us a thumbs up. Let us know that you're on. I want to just do a brief introduction of our panelists this evening. We're going to be talking about some very, very real topics tonight in a very short period of time. And all of them really could be their own show, but I wanted to bring us together because I think it brings a lot of value in the concept of mothering through, and it takes a village not just to raise children, but also to be a mother. So we have Nicole Newborn, Danielle Derrick, and Zai Richardson. I'm going to turn it over. We're going to get started right away. I want everyone to just kind of introduce themselves and say why you feel like your situation in particular is important for mothers to understand. Because when I think about the conversation of mothering through, I decided to title it Session Mothering Through because I think just that in and of itself holds so much weight. And so can each of you speak a little bit about what your specific situation taught you about that term mothering through? And Nicole, I want to start with you.
Okay, so I'm Nicole. My experience is that after the birth of my second child, I experienced 4 miscarriages before I gave birth to my son. And so it's an important topic. One, because a lot of women just don't talk about miscarriages in general. I found out through my own experiences once I started talking to friends and acquaintances that a lot of people had actually gone through what I went through, but no one ever talks about it. One, because it's painful, and 2, because it can be embarrassing sometimes as mothers. And it's also an important conversation because sometimes you feel like your feelings aren't valid because you already have children. So experiencing loss after having successful pregnancies is also a part of it. And it's just, and then 3, in terms of the topic of mothering through, you know, when you do have children and then you experience loss, you want to grieve, but you also have to be a mom because you can't neglect the children that you already have. So it's a lot that's involved in that emotionally. And so I feel it's a really important conversation to have as mothers.
Thank you, Nicole. Danielle. Hey, Wendy. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Nicole. Danielle.
Hi, I'm Danielle. I am the mother of 3. And by the time I turned 35 years old, I lost my mother to cancer. I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and then I actually filed for divorce, probably like 2 days after I found out I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so how does one mother through all of this trauma and all of these shocks and surprises? And for me, I think what's important for mothers to learn that just because you're a single mother and you're going through a health issue doesn't mean that you're alone. Single doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're alone. You definitely need to learn how to ask for help, take the help that's actually offered to you, and really figure out how to put you first. Which is, I think, for us as mothers, sometimes that can be a very hard thing for us to do because we're always giving and making sure that our children have the best or we're taking care of their needs. But sometimes we have to take a step back and think about what are my needs and how can I be good so that I can make sure that my children are good.
Thank you, Danielle. We got some hearts when you were talking, so that is good. So people are agreeing with you as well. Zai, can you introduce yourself and say what you're going to be talking about and why it's important for you? Why you think it's important for mothers who are experiencing a similar situation? Well, Zai is also, we're going to jump back on, so hopefully she'll come back on. Zai is going to be representing mothering through divorce. I'll just give a little bit of background about her. She's a mother of 2 wonderful children and experienced divorce at a time where where her children were growing up at a certain developmental stage. And so she'll be talking about that, bringing that expertise in. So starting with Nicole and Danielle, often as mothers, we're trained, and Danielle, this goes into your topic, or what you just said, we're trained to put ourselves on the back burner. But just hearing what you all both said as far as the loss that you experienced, Nicole, and Danielle experienced significant loss in a short amount of time. Each of your situations caused you all to place yourselves and your needs and your mental health as a priority. What was that process like for you? And did you find or did you notice that you had any resistance with that as well? And as you all are thinking about your response, Nicole, I want to start with you. Zai, I want to welcome you back. We'll get right back to you. Well, you know what? Let's pause and let's let you introduce yourself. So Zai, go ahead. We're waiting for you. Zai.
Hi guys, I cut off for some reason.
So Zai, can you talk a little bit about what you'll be talking about this evening? I think she might be having a delay. So Nicole, I want to start with you. Let's go back to, again, the question about putting ourselves on the back burner as mothers and dealing with a situation that forces us to put ourselves on the forefront. How was that like for you? Or what was that like? What was that like?
It was hard at first. It really, because it's almost like an instinct to put yourself second, third, last, whatever, make other people the priority that our children, our husbands, or even some of our obligations. So for me, it was talking to friends like yourself and, you know, my mom, who had to remind me to put myself first, whether that was just taking time to take a bath by myself, or, you know, just going for a walk by myself, or just laying in the bed and sleeping in instead of waking up early to cook. I had to be reminded of that like every day, because again, it's like an instinct for me, and I would forget. But you know, when you go through loss and you're grieving, it was almost like a tug of war for me, because again, I have these two other children, and at the time my children were young. They were 3, 4, so they were needy, you know. But luckily I had the support of my husband, who kind of stepped in and kind of filled that gap for me to allow me the time that I needed to grieve and heal and cry, or whatever it was that I needed to do at the time.
Danielle?
I think for me, the biggest thing is, okay, so you get this diagnosis and you spend this time telling people, okay, this is what's going on with me. So I'm a firm believer in don't hide your diagnosis. Like, you going through it with my mom, and she didn't tell people because I guess she wanted to feel like this strong person who moms don't have the chance to get sick. For me, I learned you have to tell people. But what I learned from telling people about my diagnosis is I spent more time managing how they felt about my diagnosis than actually thinking about what my diagnosis is like. And I remember I would go to my doctor's appointments. So they make you meet with like 20 different doctors all in like 1 week. And when I got to my geneticist, she said to me, she said, "You look so put together. Have you taken time to cry? Have you taken time for yourself?" And I remember at the time I said, I'm good. You know, and I'm thinking in my brain, I'm like, being a mom is like having a beautiful giant handbag. It's pretty on the outside, it looks nice, but on the inside it's a mess. And it's, you know, there's all kinds of junk in there. And that's kind of how my life was. But it wasn't until I think I got past my surgery and I started my treatment. And for a lot of cancer survivors, it's not so much about the surgery as it is the treatment and what it does to your body. For me, I think it's the hardest part. When your body isn't able to do simple things that you think you should be able to do, that's when you start to say, okay, I have to put me first, because if I'm not good, my children aren't going to be good. And if I'm not here to take care of my children, then who is going to take care of my children? So I think for me, that was what put me on my path to making sure that I put my mental health and my physical and my spiritual and all types of health first, so that I could make sure that I could be the kind of mother that I wanted to be.
Can you hear us now? Is it better for you? Okay, we're still having audio. So Danielle, you're going to have to play 2 roles, because one of the things that you said that you also experienced is divorce too during this time. And so I want to bring in a comment from Wendy, and she says that I have a husband and he wants a divorce. And I also have 4 beautiful children, and I don't know how to explain to my children that their dad will no longer live in the house. And so is this something that you can kind of talk through? And I'm also a member of the Happily Divorced crew, and so Happily Co-Parenting crew. And so this is something that I can also share and talk about as well until I was able to come back in.
So for my children are very interesting children, to say the least. So in my household, everything is humor heals. And any time that you think something should not be funny, I think my children and I, probably mostly me, are making funny comments about it. But I think this was just one topic that I didn't know how to broach with my children. They knew with the cancer diagnosis and everything that was going along that their dad wasn't there. But it wasn't until I sat them down, probably about 2 years later, to say, hey, guess what? I'm going to court in a couple of weeks, and your dad and I won't be married anymore. One child was just like, they don't care. You know, they're like, okay, whatever. The other child said, okay, it was time. And then my youngest child, he actually went to his school nurse, and he told the nurse that his parents were getting a divorce and he wasn't happy about it. So then we have to bring in the guidance counselor at the school. Mm-hmm. And they actually talked to him about divorce. He was under the impression that tomorrow I was going to bring a new man into the house and he was going to have a new dad, and he just did not want to have a new dad. And I'm like, no, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. But it was a lot of talking and making him feel comfortable, and getting him to a place that just because your parents are no longer married does not mean that you're still not their child. Just because that parent doesn't live in the household doesn't mean he's still not your dad. He will always be your dad and your father, and you just have to maintain your relationship in a different type of way. And it's so funny because now, fast forward years later, my son and I were talking, and we were looking at a show where he happened to walk in the room while I was watching a show about people finding love online. And I said, hey, do you think it's time for me to get a boyfriend and, you know, see if we can find somebody to match with me? And he's like, yes, I want to help. So it's just interesting. He went from this person who was really, really depressed about his parents getting a divorce to now he's like happy to maybe try to get me hooked up with someone.
If anyone in the Dr. Tara community has a friend, y'all can put that in. I think that also speaks to what Wendy's comment about, like, how do you explain that? And I think, like you said, just because we don't live together doesn't mean that we're still not your parents. It doesn't mean that we still don't love you. It doesn't mean that we're not going to work together for you. And I want to bring up Erica's comment, because I think regardless of what the situation is, that comment about the kids being able to tell is so true, regardless of whether it's loss, regardless of whether it's a health condition or divorce or whatever change is going to happen. And so when we think about the issues that we're talking about, loss, health challenges, divorce, all of them impact our family and family structures. And so how did you all, and Nicole, I'll start with you because Danielle, you've kind of touched on it, but how did you all bring your children into these conversations, especially given the understanding that not only are we the experts of our children, but our children are also the experts of us as well?
Mm-hmm. So 2 things for me. One was, and it was really hard for me because, and I'll preface by saying this, I grew up with a mother who didn't really display emotion. Like, I never saw my mother cry. I can count on one. I'm 41 years old. I could probably count on maybe 1 or 2 times that I've actually seen my mother cry or upset and vulnerable and exposed. And so the first thing that I did was I let them see me cry. I let them see me mourn, even though it was hard for me because, again, I didn't grow up like that, but I thought that it was important to share that with them so that they can know it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to cry and show those emotions and just be said, that it was okay to do that. I was afraid to do that because, you know, you don't want your kids to be worried about you. But what I found was that my girls, even at a really young age, they were there as a part of my support structure. So it helped me. I explained it to them. So again, they were very young, 4 or 5 years old, something like that. But God does everything great. So very shortly before I had these miscarriages, my kids, they were in elementary school, they had planted these little flowers in like a styrofoam cup and brought them home. And one of them, I have 2 children, one of them grew and the other one didn't. And so I was able to use the analogy planting a seed, and sometimes it grows, and sometimes when you plant a seed, sometimes it doesn't. Now, again, I don't take credit for this at all. This was all God, because for the fact that they already had this example, and I just happened to look over it and see it, and I was like, you know what, this is how I'm going to explain to them that mommy had a seed, had a baby growing inside, and sometimes it grows and sometimes it doesn't, and they got it. That made sense to them. And 4 or 5-year-old friends, they weren't as sad. I mean, they were sad for me, but they weren't necessarily sad for the loss, because they didn't have a chance to connect like we connect as soon as we find out we're pregnant, right? We connect immediately to that child. So their loss was different from my loss, but sharing that experience with them, really sharing that experience, and like I said, letting them just climb in the bed and hold me and lay on my lap or wipe my tears, that it helped us bond, as mother and daughters. Having my husband on the other side, it helped us bond as a family, and I think it made us stronger. So I wouldn't change anything about how we decided to handle that with regards to sharing that with the kids, and also, like I said, not just sharing the loss and experience itself, but everything that came along with it. I wouldn't change a thing.
Thank you. Danielle, do you want to talk a little bit about how you share with your children your diagnosis? I think that one of the things too, for children, moms don't get sick, right? Like, mom can be sick, but she's still making sure the house is clean. She's still making sure that everybody is taken care of. And then you get a diagnosis that, for many adults, just hearing the term cancer, it automatically places you in panic mode or an anxiety mode. How did you handle or navigate that conversation with your children?
So I want to preface this by saying that when you have multiple children, you cannot treat your children the same. Anybody who thinks that I have to treat all of my children the same because that's what's fair, you need to reevaluate that. So I had to sit down and meet each child with where they were in their development as a growing human being. So at the time, I had a 19-year-old who was just diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he also has severe anxiety. So how do I tell them? I had to sit down and carefully think about, okay, this is what I need you to do. This is what's going on with me, but say it in a way that didn't provide more anxiety and more stress for him. So again, it goes to that whole managing other people's feelings, but I think that this particular instance was very appropriate to make sure that he was in a healthy place so that I could continue to get healthy with my diagnosis. With my little one, it was very funny because I sat him down. He was 5 years old at the time. And I said, listen, mommy's sick. Mommy has to have surgery. And it would be really helpful for mommy if you didn't fight with your sister, who was about 10 years old at the time. And he sat there and he thought about it. And he said, well, how about you just don't get sick? And so I had to think about, okay, well, that's not going to happen. So I'm really going to need to rely on you to help. And so one of the things that I actually did with my children is when I had my mastectomy, you have all these tubes coming out of you. This may sound gruesome, but I actually had my children help me to drain my tubes. And it was a very simple task. They enjoyed it because just the simple task of cleaning the tube with the alcohol, for them, they felt like they were a part of helping me to get better. And I think just involving them as much as possible for what their age allows is definitely very helpful for them. I grew up where my parents didn't share anything with me. I had relatives who died and I don't even know what they died from. You just knew you went to a funeral. They may have been sick, but you didn't know. Your parents didn't talk to you about anything because I guess they didn't think that you were aware. And so one of the conscious decisions I made when I became a parent is I was going to be honest, but age appropriately honest with my children, so that they wouldn't be in this unknown and not know what was going on.
And I'll take the answer about divorce too. And I want to go back to that. One of the things that both of you said that resonated, I think, with so many people in the comments is how common it is to keep secrets as parents, right? How common it is to not show emotions, how common it is to not show sickness. I'm just going to get through it. And I'm going to think that my children can't see. Well, one of the things that I am a big believer and I know to be true is, again, just as much as we are experts of our children are experts of us. And so if I'm going to to this treatment, or if I'm in bed all day, I want to know what's wrong. I want to know what's happening and what's going on, because like everyone is saying, I know Christina and Erica said it too, children are very perceptive. And I think for me, just taking the lens of mothering through divorce, and Danielle, I'm agreeing with your comment about having to make the decision to have very age appropriate conversations. So my children were, I think, about 3 and 10. And so a 3-year-old is not going to understand, hey, we're separate. I told, Lola we were getting out. She's like, yes, I'm going to get them. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. She's great. Donald had, and I'll be transparent, Donald had a very different reaction, because this was a marriage that I brought him into. So he had already dealt with and had to transition from the breakup or the loss of his dad and I separating. And now this was another loss. So that was a very, very delicate situation. With Lola, what her reaction was more delayed, right? So moving day, it was great. It was awesome. I get my own room. I tried to make sure their rooms were painted and, decorated by the time they got in. And then the dust settles and it's like, oh, wait, well, where's this person? Oh, wait, I want to go back to our old house. And so for me, one of the things that was so important for me in bringing my children into this and knowing that this was impacting their lives was understanding that this was a conversation that we were going to have for some time. And getting myself to the point where if Lola said, I want to go back, I want us all to go back home, understanding that that's not something to get frustrated at, but that's something to remember that we're here. And like you said, it doesn't negate or change anything as it relates to parenting. What it does change is how we function now as a unit within this larger scope of family too. And so thinking about that, one of the things that always makes me or puts this in perspective for me is our own mental health, right? Like you said, like both of you have said, I can only do that effectively for my children when I am in the right mental space, right? So if I'm not in the right mental space, guess what? We all not in the right mental space. And so when we talk about mental health, how did these events impact your mental health? I think that is something else that as mothers, oftentimes acknowledging our own mental health, our emotional health can come with feelings of guilt or shame or overcompensation in behaviors. And so how did you all navigate the ups and downs of your moods? And, I may have been having a good day on Monday, but Tuesday I'm waking up and I don't want to get out of bed. So how did you all navigate that as a parent?
Yeah, it was really hard. After the first miscarriage, I was sad. Obviously, I had a DNC for that one, so I came home. I cried for a couple of days, and I was actually okay after a while in terms of just how I felt on a daily basis. The second miscarriage was extremely hard. One, because of what the process was for me releasing the baby, if you will. That was extremely hard. And then by the time I got to 3 and 4, it had gotten to a point where I thought it was me. And so, in addition to grieving the loss, I was also feeling guilty and ashamed and unworthy. I felt like I had done something wrong. I started, beating myself up, saying, you should have lost some weight. You should have, made sure you took your vitamins every day, and maybe you should have started exercise. You know what I mean? You start going because you're trying to figure out why this happened, and because there's no explanation that the doctors or anybody can give you, you automatically start to blame yourself, and that weighs on you really heavily. So one of the things that I started doing, and I didn't do it intentionally thinking that this was going to help me, I just started doing it. But one of the things that helped me was really talking to people. Like I started posting on Facebook, and then people just telling my story. Then people would inbox me and they would tell me their story, and they would tell me how they, went through something similar, or, I lost twins, or, all of these stories. Because like I said, right, people go through this, women go through this all the time, but they never talk about it. So once I started talking about it and sharing my story, and realized how much I was helping other women just by sharing, and like Shamia said, being vulnerable and open, and willing to do that, it started to help me. Like it aided in my own healing process without me even knowing it, because it gave my loss purpose. It gave what I was experiencing it gave me that meaning that I was looking for. It answered the why, for me. So that really, really helped. And once I started doing it, I just started doing it some more. The more I realized how much it was helping me, the more I started talking about it and sharing. And you don't do it all the time with everybody, right? You use some wisdom and some judgment in terms of who, you're sharing your story with. But that's really what helped me. And again, listening to my friends that had to remind me when they could see me slipping away. Like, I'm one of these people that kind of recluse. Is that the word? Like, when you shut down and you don't really want to talk to anybody. So after my friends, or my mother mainly, noticed that she hadn't heard from me in a couple of days, or I hadn't been reaching out, then they would come find me. They were knocking on my door, whether I wanted to or not. So whether I wanted to talk or whatever. So having that support system is really what I think, again, just helped reel me back in and keep me out of my thoughts. And then it was also my faith. Really, it helped me hold on to this promise that I thought that God had, or that I knew that God had made me, that I was going to conceive and carry and birth a son. And I just held on to that, like, every single day, and did everything that I had to do until we finally conceived and I birthed that son.
Thank you, Dana. What about you as far as your mental health journey with it?
So definitely for me, there's two things that were helpful. One, finding that circle, and two, running for my life. And so I think it goes back to that geneticist and what she said to me, have you taken time for you? Everything looks so perfect. And I think I tried to keep that pace up, right? Because we have to be strong. We can't show what's wrong with us. Even though I can't lift my left arm, over my head, I still have to pretend that I can pick up something heavy because I need to get this thing done for my children. And I think what's difficult about being a 35-year-old, having a mastectomy, getting diagnosed with breast cancer, is the first thing that you hear when you tell people is, this lady at my job had breast cancer. Do you want to talk to her and about her story? This lady, my cousin had it. My sister had it. This person, do you want to talk to them? And I'm like, I don't know these strangers. I don't want to talk to them. Most of them are not in my age group. They don't understand what it's like to be a 35-year-old who's going through menopause. You know what I mean? It's just like they don't get it. My whole body has changed. Yes, these are women, and yes, they've experienced some of the things, but I can't relate to them. So I went out and I found people who were my age, groups of breast cancer survivors or people who are going through breast cancer treatment. For me, I'm not a person that likes to share a lot unless I'm sharing with my friends. So at first I would just go on Facebook groups or chat rooms and just observe. I wouldn't comment. And then eventually I got comfortable enough where I could start talking to people. Also, running for my life has been the best thing for me. I feel like life is like a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I think that pace that I was trying to run a sprinting race in a marathon with dealing with everything, and it just wasn't working for me. But when I slowed down and actually started running literally as well as figuratively slowly, I would get out and just do a 5K every day. And eventually it became 7 miles and 10 miles. That was so good for my mental health because one, it was the exercise was great, but two, it just allowed my mind to be free and just wander and think. I didn't have to think about children. I didn't have to think about what they were doing. I just put some kind of podcast in and just run. So that was definitely very helpful for me, just the running, as well as finding a circle of people that I could relate to, that I could talk to my problems about.
I think for me, in hearing you all too, I think my process in being a mom who has gone through divorce, and Angel, I want to applaud her comment, check on your strong friends, and Nikki's comment, slow and steady. I think those hold so much weight. I think for me, going through a divorce, one, for my mental health was a piece of shame. Like, okay, am I allowed to do this, right? Like, people are not supposed to do this. You are trained in relationships. How did you end up here? How did you end up on this other side? And then, honestly, I felt angry. And I remember or feeling a little bit of shame, like I didn't want to talk to people because one of the things that people would often say, and this is well-intentioned, oh my gosh, what happened? And I had to get to the point where no, you don't get to know what happened, because you learning what happened to me is me retelling my trauma, right? Is me retelling a situation that doesn't feel good. And so after I've shared it out with you, I'm left to sit and filter through that. And so, like both of you said, picking and choosing who I was going to share this information with. And oftentimes, it was people who were already there during the lead up. So it wasn't like a shocker to my close friends, and understanding too that you don't have to share unless you're ready to share. And then when you do share, then for me, it was more vulnerable, but understanding too that I had to give myself, and I'm big on that term, giving ourselves permission to be authentic and to acknowledge, this didn't go the way that I wanted. And one of the things that I remember seeing on Facebook was someone's comment about, so many people are ready to call marriage, like their marriage quits. They're not taking the time anymore, and how infuriated it made me, or infuriating it was, because it's like, if you only knew, right? If you only knew, and not only that, but if you only knew that, and I didn't know this, but it's at a divorce hearing, they call both parties, and like I said, my ex-husband and I, we were in good terms after we sat next to each other at our hearing, right? We sat next, took a picture afterwards, hugged, cried, all that after our hearing. But at your hearing, they ask you questions about your wedding day, right? So here you are recounting, tell me about the day you got and what. And so you're reliving all of this. The day you are saying that you want your marriage to be over, and just the loss that comes with that, and giving yourself permission to still experience that, right? Giving yourself permission. And I think for me, giving myself permission to be sad about something that, I knew had run its course was so liberating for me, versus, nope, this is what you said you wanted, and so you have to keep going through that. And so, I want to go back to Erica's point, being strong is so overrated, having that safe space to be vulnerable, which to me is being human, right? Human beings are vulnerable. And so giving myself permission to be a person, right? Not Dr. Tara, but I could be Tara experiencing my own vulnerability and experiencing my own healing was one of the best things that I think that I could do for my own mental health and for the mental health of my children. Danielle?
I was just going to say, and that is being strong. I think that sometimes people think that being strong is showing no emotional. Being vulnerable is being strong. And I always, people would say to me, because I look like I was dealing with my diagnosis so effortlessly, and they would say, oh, you're the strongest person that I've known. You've gone through X, Y, Z, and you just stand there and you're great. And I felt like saying, no, I'm an imposter. I'm not strong, because I can't share these feelings. I can't take time for myself. I can't be human, as you said. And it wasn't until, and I keep revisiting that conversation with my geneticist, when she was like, well, why haven't you taken time for yourself? Once I decided to put myself first and take time for myself, that is actually when I became strong.
Nicole.
I'm sorry. It is, because, and this is why conversations like this are so important, because part of the reason why we feel like that is because people aren't transparent enough. They aren't honest enough. Like they want to walk around pretending like everything is okay, so that people think that you have it all together, because you don't want people in business, and you don't want people to think that you're weak, or you don't want people to think that you're less than, or you want, like, all of these feelings that we have about what people are going to think about us and how they're going to judge us. So we put on this brave face, we put on our superwoman cape, and all that, instead of having real conversations with one another. I'll never forget, I was in a situation where I was talking to someone, a complete stranger that I had just met, and I decided to open up to her just about some marriage stuff. And she sat there, and I could talk to this woman for 3 hours. I just met her. And she cried, and she was just like, I can't believe you're sharing all these things. My closest friends don't share with me like this. They walk around acting like they got it all together, making me feel like I'm the crazy one. I'm like, girl, please, no, you ain't crazy. You are not crazy. It is not you. It's not you. It's all of us. So that's why conversations like this out in the open in public, like you said earlier, Tara, like, this is international. Like, anybody could be hearing this conversation right now. And it's important because, like I said early on, for me, I thought it was just me. I thought I was the only one that was going through this. And therefore, I thought that I was doing something wrong, and I wasn't.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I want to say with Nicole's comment about if they only knew how much you go through to live up with that, but it's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting, and it weighs so heavy on you. And I think too, since we're talking about mothering through, I think it can give your children the wrong impression on how they then deal with their emotions too, right? So if mom isn't sad about this, but I'm sad, but she's not sad, then can I be sad? And, and I think one of the greatest gifts we can give our children is permission to feel their own emotions. And a lot of times, like you said, Nicole, it's through them seeing that we experience all of these emotions. Right? Like, I don't have to be this perfect child, because guess what? Mommy can be a human, and to me, that's perfectly human too. And so understanding too, I want to bring in Cheryl's comment about that self-care piece. And so as you all talked about your mental health states and how and where you were and your highs and lows with that, where did that self-care piece come in, and how did it click? Because I think going back to what you said, Nicole, about that stigma around mothers and mental health and mothers and tasks and everything else, is that stigma of we are superwomen. Like, I don't even know how many times I've seen just in quarantine the memes about moms are feeling this pressure to make sure everything is done, or dad is in the kitchen and you still go all the way upstairs to ask mom if you can get something to drink. And so that stigma and that pressure that we put on ourselves, and someone else said it too, that conditioning that we put on ourselves to be superwoman. So how did you all break that and allow yourself to practice self-care? And what does self-care look like and mean for you all on an individual basis?
I'm shaking my head at myself, because I didn't do this while I was necessarily going through the losses with the miscarriages. With one of them, I think it was the second or third one, I can't remember. Y'all gonna think I'm crazy. I woke up that morning, about 5 o'clock that morning, feeling like I was in labor. Okay, so I knew that it was getting ready to happen. And so I sat there for like 2 hours in labor pains, just at the bottom of my bed. My husband was asleep, and I just did it by myself. Like, I'm just on my knees, whatever. Then I ran to the bathroom because it started happening. So, but later my husband and I, along with the children, we were scheduled to take a business trip that day, a road trip, but a business trip. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go anyway. I'm gonna do it because I gotta be there for the team, and I gotta do this and I gotta do that. Y'all know we drove from Baltimore to Tennessee that day. And I literally, every time I felt something, we would stop at a Bojangles or whatever. And I felt like I was, I hope it's not too graphic, delivering my baby in a toilet on the side of 95 or at a Bojangles. It was crazy. And look on it, I'm like, what in the world were you thinking? Like, why did you feel like you had to be strong? Why did you feel like you had to push through and be there and show up anyway when you were going through something so traumatic? Like, in hindsight, it was stupid. Like, why did you do that? So it took me going through experiences like that, and really just getting tired of it and feeling like I just can't take this anymore. Like, I have to learn how to say no. I have to learn how to say no. So self-care for me looks like getting up early before all the kids and the rest of the house is up, where I actually have some quiet time. Self-care for me, like Danielle, I started running, back then, and I started doing some distance training for a half a marathon. Like, you got to get past mile 3 and 5 before you really start feeling it. So I started doing that. Self-care for me is shopping. Self-care for me is just going to go sit at a Starbucks. Self-care for me is whatever I feel like doing that day. Self-care for me is telling myself yes and telling everybody else no. Self-care for me is letting that laundry pile up because you know what? I don't feel like it. Self-care is going to sleep without doing the dishes because you know what? It's my house, they my dishes, and I don't feel like it. I can do it in the morning. Self-care for me is doing whatever I feel like doing and not doing whatever I don't feel like doing. And it took me a really, really long time to get that. It did.
And what about you?
Making yourself a priority. Yeah,
making yourself a priority. And I think the interesting thing, so there's this meditation that I teach called the Heaven and Hell meditation, right? So it sounds weird, but it's the same premise that whatever your higher power is going to meet you there, right? So if you are a spiritual person, you believe that there is no place you can go where your God is not, right? So you can be in a state of gratitude that's going to get you to God, or you can be in a state of despair and it's still going to get you there, right? Like, and so one of the things that it made me think of listening to you talk is like, wow, you were in the hell meditation. It's still going to get you to self-care, but you're going to allow yourself to go through hell to get there. And I think as moms, we've been conditioned to also think that, right? I have to earn my self-care. I have to have driven hundreds of miles in order, you know what, now I'm tired, versus no, I can be great and have a self-care day, or I can realize that I don't want to do this and have a self-care day too. And so allowing, like you said, that shift that it occurred for you to allow myself, I'm not going to allow myself to get to self-care from this point. I'm going to take it right here. It's going to be integrated into what I'm already doing. And the strength that it takes to acknowledge that to yourself too.
You said,
what would you say?
You said that a lot better than me.
Danielle, what about you, that self-care piece?
I think doing all of those things that were mentioned, but not feeling guilty about it. Because I think there would be times where I would not do the laundry. I don't do dishes now. I refuse to do dishes. And we don't have a dishwasher. Well, we have two, my children. But, I don't do those things, but I would always feel guilty about it. So just not feeling guilty about making time for me. And that includes binge watching TV all day Saturday. Like literally waking up at 7 a.m., maybe taking breaks to feed my kids, maybe not, because I have a 15-year-old and she can cook for the little one. But like binge watching TV all day and not doing anything and not feeling guilty about it. Definitely doing the running, definitely doing the meditating. Talking to people and going out and enjoying things that I didn't do because I felt like mothers shouldn't do. Just making me time, getting my eyebrows done. I cannot wait to go get my eyebrows done, when they let us out of here. And then also one of the things that I never have successfully been able to do was therapy. Every single therapist that I've had my entire life, I literally did not open up to them. Like it would get to the point where I would start asking them questions and them not asking me questions. And so one day when I went to, thank goodness my cancer center actually gives us free therapy, went to the therapy session. It was an individual session. And we kind of talked and she just sat down and she said, "What are you here for?" And then I said, "I don't know." And she's like, "Well, you have to be here for something." And then I just burst out into tears. So being a person who hadn't cried, even when my mom died in 2013, to now fast forward to January 2020, crying for the first time, it was just so therapeutic. And to somebody's question, as far as like, how do you lose the guilt? I think it's just not caring. It's honestly just not caring. Why should you feel guilty about eating all of the chocolate chip cookies, even though your kids like chocolate chip cookies too, and there's only one left, so who's going to get, like, they ate 20 chocolate chip cookies already. Why can't I just have the last one? It doesn't mean that I'm a bad mother. And it takes practice, a lot of practice, to sit in your room and binge watch TV all day and not care about the laundry. Yes, the laundry's still going to be there tomorrow when you get there, but it's okay. The house is not going to burn down because you didn't do laundry today, or because you went out with your girlfriends instead of staying in the house. Of course, your kids should be taken care of and not neglected, but the world is not going to end because you take time for yourself. But your world, your personal world, could end if you don't take time for yourself, because you can have a stroke, you can have a heart attack, you can, have other health ailments that come about because you're not taking care of yourself. Just think of yourself like a teapot. As that pressure builds because you're not taking care of yourself, one day you are going to explode if you don't put yourself first. And so you shouldn't feel bad about that.
All facts.
Put that on a t-shirt, right? I love that, right? The world is not going to end because you participate in the act of self-care. However, your literal world can end.
That's powerful.
Yes.
That's powerful. And I experienced that, when I got diagnosed with high blood pressure, and I was in denial about that at first. And my friends would tell me I wasn't taking my blood pressure medicine, and I was still eating crabs and whatever else I wanted to eat. And my friends had to keep reminding me and say, "Nick." And my husband one day, he got on me one day because he has high blood pressure, and I had taken him, quick story, I had taken him to the dentist and they took his pressure before they saw him. Never saw a dentist do that. But thank God they did, because his pressure was so high, they wouldn't touch him. They made him go to the emergency room. And I laid a guilt trip on him so hard, sitting in that parking lot. How you sit, go leave us here? You gonna leave me here to take care of these kids by myself? Da 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 da. Right. And that finally motivated him to go and get the care he needed. And so fast forward a couple years later, when it was my turn, he guilt tripped me in the same way. And how you gonna leave me here to take care of these kids by myself? And I never in my mind, oh, look at these nails. I never in my mind really thought about it in that way, Danielle. I didn't think, oh, I could die. Oh, I could have a stroke. Oh, I could, literally lose my way of life, and how that would impact my children if I didn't just start taking the time to take care of me. Like when somebody connected those dots for me and it really sunk in, it was like, oh shoot, what are my kids? What is my husband going to do if I'm not here? Or God forbid, I'm in a situation where I become a burden to them because I'm stroked out, paralyzed, can't feed myself. Like when somebody helps you, or you just figure that out and that light bulb goes off, that's when you stop caring.
For me, it was and again, I'm on this permission thing, because I think so much of the guilt is us literally saying to ourselves, self-talk, give myself permission to do this. And so I think for me, it was permission to rewrite the narrative of motherhood, right? So going through a divorce, so I remember Google searching like separation, and I came across so many sites that were like, a good wife is this. A good wife stands by her man. Here are examples of couples that have weathered storms, and I'm like, oh no, I'm not a good wife if I should even, entertain this idea. And then it got to the point where it was like, okay, do you want to live for this, or do you want to live for yourself? And giving myself permission to rewrite the narrative of a good mom. A good mom is honest about her feelings and is authentic in her needs. And a good mom takes care of her mental health. And the mom that I was in that situation was not the mom that I aspired to be, the Tara that I was, right? And so before I'm a mom, I'm Tara, right? The Tara that I was in that situation was not Tara that was beneficial to my mental health, to anyone else's mental health, to any type of relationship. And so giving myself permission to create my own narrative about what a good Tara is, what a good mom is, what a good partner is, and like one of the things that I always say, my relationship with both Donald and Lola's dads is so much better outside of that, right? The late relationships don't die, they transition. And giving myself parameters. And so, I remember my ex-husband and I, we did a co-parenting talk, and one of the best pieces of advice was someone gave me is, you can say whatever you want on your last day, but guess what? We never have a last day, because we're going to be raising this child forever, right? So that helped me to decide that, okay, this conversation's for my girlfriends, this conversation's for him, right? And so with that too, allowing myself to take that time to, like you said, to just feed into what it is that I need in that moment. And I think for me, coming to the realization that I didn't even know, right? And this goes into Melissa's point, how do you make yourself priority when it's ingrained? And I think that's such a good point. We have associated, so the narrative with motherhood that is often touted and celebrated is that a good mother is one who is a martyr, right? A good mother is a martyr. We hear the stories all the time. My mom didn't sleep for 6 years, taking me back and forth to gymnastics practice. She did, and so so we aspire to be that heroic, quote unquote, story that people talk about. And so when you think about making yourself a priority, part of that is knowing that you have to give yourself permission to create your own motherhood story. And you're teaching your children how to then treat themselves. Nicole, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just one thing to that point is one of the things, to the point that you were making about us aspiring to be like our moms and our grandmothers and our great grandmothers. One of the things that clicked for me one day was, I don't want to be like that. And that's okay. Like I had to figure out what kind of mom I wanted to be. Even if it's something as simple as, I don't like helping my children with homework. I ain't that mom. I let my kids stay on iPads and iPhones for 4 hours a day instead of the recommended 2. Why? because I ain't that mom. Like, I just literally, and I jokingly say that with friends and things like that sometimes when they're talking about, oh, I don't let my children do this, and oh, I don't let my children do that, and I make sure my kids do that. I just like, I ain't that mom, because I just made a decision that this is the kind of mom that I want to be, and I don't want to be like those moms, and I don't want to be like you. I want to be like me, and I had to be okay with that. And so that helps me, like what somebody was saying before about with the guilt, because I don't care. Because why? Because I'm not that mom that does laundry every day. I'm not that mom that washes, dries, folds, and put away all in the same day. I'm just not that mom. So, and that's okay. And one of the most important words that I learned from you, Tara, is just allowing yourself and giving yourself that grace to do and be whatever it is that you need to do and be, to be, like you said, a Nicole, a good friend, a good sister, a good daughter, and a wife and a good mom. All of that has to work together.
And you were going to say something too.
I was just going to say the lesson, you learn lessons from your parents, and you either emulate them or you mirror them or you do the complete opposite. And I think growing up, I had a mom that gave up everything. Like I had a kid at 15, she worked 2 jobs so I could go to college and didn't have to worry about taking care of my child. She helped to do all of that. When I got older, she gave everything to my children. So I didn't even have to give them Christmas if I didn't want to, because she took care of everything. Then as her mom got sick, she went to work. She took care of her mom. She did all of these things that a quote unquote great mom or grandma or daughter would do. But the one thing that she didn't do is she didn't live for herself. And I'm not saying that you don't take care of your family when they're in need, or you don't, fill in when it's necessary. But she died with stage 4 cancer because she didn't put herself first, because she put off going to the doctors, because she put off exercising, because running from place to place, you eat fast food because you don't have time to cook. Like, again, it's the whole, is the world going to end because you took care of yourself? Or unfortunately, like her, your world will end because you don't take care of yourself. So you do have to not feel guilty about that. And you can definitely overcome that guilt when you know that your life is on the line and you want to be here for your kids. You want to be here to see your grandkids, your great grandkids. And the way we live in these days, you might even see your great great grandkids. So there's nothing to feel guilty about, and definitely put yourself first.
And I think too, just a tangible tool is start with what's easiest, right? Like a lot of times we feel like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna put myself first. I'm gonna give myself the whole day off tomorrow. No, I'm not. Right? I'm going to say that. I'm going to make that announcement to everybody. No one talk to me. No one do this to me. Knowing that I wake up at 8, by 8:30, I'm still making breakfast. Right? No, someone said, know your audience, know yourself. Right? If I can't give myself 8 hours off, I'm not going to start with 8 hours off. Can I start with 5 minutes? Right? There's a meditation that we teach called RAIN, which is which acronym recognize, allow, acknowledge, investigate, and then nurture. Right. And it's literally 20 seconds. And we had on another webinar, someone used hand washing as a way to do it. I'm recognizing while I'm washing my hands, you know what, I feel tense, I feel anxious about something, I feel tired. I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm acknowledging that I didn't sleep well last night. I am allowing myself to feel tired, right? I don't want to allow myself to feel like I have to push through. I'm going to investigate. Well, why didn't I sleep well last night? It's because I sleep with 2 other children in the bed and they were kicking me or they were moving over or they were doing something else. I'm going to investigate where they came from. And then the most important part is I'm going to nurture. So I feel stress on my shoulders. I want to take 30 seconds just to rub my shoulders. I'm going to take 30 seconds just to, right? Self-talk. I'm going to give myself 20 minutes today. I'm going to wake up 20 minutes earlier than my children do tomorrow. Start with what is easiest. And as I do those small things, what you're doing without even recognizing is something called momentum building. And so I'm momentum building so that then I can tackle something harder. If I can't take a full day because that's going to make me feel guilty, I don't want to feel guilty about feeling guilty. And so I then want to acknowledge that, right? That's part of that recognizing and acknowledging and allowing. I'm going to recognize that. I'm going to acknowledge, you know what? And the whole day would be too much for me, but I can give myself 5 minutes. What would it be like for me to sit with 5 minutes? And then guess what? That 5 minute turns to 10 and that 10 minutes turns to 15.
That's good. How many times do we feel guilty about feeling guilty?
Right.
That was good too.
Mhm. Thank you. So we're getting ready to wrap up. This conversation has just been so helpful for me. I know everyone has been in the comments too, but I want to ask you all 3 takeaways. If you could give words of wisdom to a mom or a mom supporter who is going through or has gone through what you have been through, loss, health challenges, marriage or relationship transitions, what would that be?
One, your feelings are valid. Again, with loss and miscarriage, I don't care whether or not you had a miscarriage at 6 weeks, 16 weeks, 26 weeks. It doesn't matter. Your feelings are still valid. I don't care whether you already have children. You could have 5 kids already. And if you have another, your feelings are still valid. Loss is loss. And as mothers, like I said, we connect as soon as you find out that you're pregnant. As soon as you realize that there's life inside of you, you connect and you bond with that spirit that's in you. So one, your feelings are valid. Two, you can grieve however you need to grieve. There's no right or wrong in terms of grief, when it comes to loss, whether you're someone who wants to, stay shut in and hide underneath a pillow for a month, or go out and tell the world because that makes you feel better. However you need to grieve and heal is completely up to you, and it's very personalized, so you shouldn't let anyone make you feel bad about whatever you feel like you need to do to heal. And three, which has kind of been the tone of the last 40 minutes of our conversation, is take time for yourself, because it's important. One of the things, and I'm going to stick specifically with grief and miscarriage, is in order to bring life into this world, you have to be a healthy vessel. And that means not just physically, but also spiritually and emotionally, because we're spirit first. So if your spirit is not right, if you're out of alignment, if are sad and depressed, or, guilty or shameful and all of those, negative things, then how can you even be prepared to create and bring forth life? You can't. So, you have to make that a priority. So if you've experienced loss and you want to, you still want to try and conceive, you have to make that a priority. And then I'll just add a fourth: just hold on to it. Hold on to what it is that you want. Hold on to your promise. And, and eventually you'll find the purpose in it. You'll find the purpose in the loss that you experienced.
Thank you, Nicole. Danielle, you want to do a Q&A, or do you want to just stay with
I would definitely say, if anything, being strong means being human. It doesn't mean not crying. It doesn't mean not talking about your feelings. It doesn't mean any of that. It's really being human, being vulnerable, and being okay with being human and vulnerable. Secondly, it's okay to ask for help. When you are diagnosed with any kind of health condition, there is a support group for you, and it is very important to find the support group. If the first one doesn't fit your needs, move on to the next one and the next one and the next one until you find one that fits your needs, because that support group is probably going to be the only group of people that understands exactly what it is you're going through from a health perspective. And then the last thing I would say is, in the spirit of taking time for yourself, run for your life. Whether it's running, exercising, sitting in a room, binge watching TV, whatever it is, make that time for yourself. Make that commitment to yourself to take that time for yourself, and actually take the time for yourself without guilt. And those are my 3 takeaways.
And I'll do for divorce. I think my 3 takeaways would be: first, recognizing that your children, or any type of relationship transition, your children deserve healthy parents, and healthy parents don't always live together. My children are blessed to see healthy relationships between their parents, and we are not together, right? They can call me, they can call their dads. Lola calls Donald's father, right? And talks to him on the phone sometimes. And so your children deserve healthy parents, and sometimes those healthy parents don't live together. And sometimes that's best for the family. I think for me, another takeaway would be: find a support system that is focused on the end goal, right? So it was easy for me to find people who wanted to join me in the bashing part, but I know that was a place I did not want to stay. And so what was helpful for me was to have friends that would bring me out of that and remind me, you're still going to be in a relationship with this person. And so you don't want to do that, right? That's not a place where that's not who we are as people. You know, I wanted to get to that good point. And so my support came from people who also wanted me to get to that good point. And then 3, relationship, again, I'll say everything you want to say on your last day, knowing that you will never have that was probably the biggest takeaway for me. And being in support groups and understanding that you can say whatever you want on your last day, but guess what? You will never have a last day. And so guard your tongue and temper that and use that for someone else. So Nicole and Danielle, I just want to thank you all so much for being guests. This was for me and for everybody. And so thank you all so much. We hope that this has been helpful to everyone who has tuned in tonight and joined us. Please feel free to share this and tag a friend in this. It is available on our YouTube channel, Dr. Tara. You can feel free to watch it over again or send it to someone that you love who may be going through something and can benefit from this. Next week, really quickly, I just want to announce that there will be no Dr. Tara Tuesdays because it'll be a Dr. Tara Thursday. So we are bringing on a special guest. One of the biggest topics that was brought up in our viewers' choice was co-parenting with a narcissist. And so we are bringing in a guest from California, a clinical psychologist all the way from San Diego, who is available next Thursday, May 21st. And so mark your calendar for that next Thursday. We will be having a special Dr. Tara Thursday, co-parenting with a narcissist with clinical psychologist Brianna Boyd. And so it is going to be one for the books as well. So thank you all so much. And as always, let's heal together. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Good night.